You're listening to Trek FM.
Hello and welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's 50th Anniversary Rewatch of Star Trek, in which we look back at all 729 episodes from Star Trek Enterprise all the way to Star Trek Beyond. I'm your host for today's episode, Lee Hutchison, and I'm joined by Zach from Standard Orbit. How are you, Zach?
What's up, Lee? I'm doing great. Excited to talk about the second part of our Deep Space Nine episode we left off.
I know, we've been on tender hooks for 24 hours, wondering how that episode is going to pick itself up from Inferno's light. So let's dive straight into our first episode from today, By Inferno's Light. The crew tried to defend the Alpha Quadrant from the invading Dominion fleet, but they're on their way to Cardassia instead to sign a peace treaty, and Worf and Garrick and Bashir must prepare to escape from a Dominion internment camp. So, we both loved In Purgatory's Shadow. What did you think of By Inferno's Light?
This was a very satisfying second part. Star Trek has a reputation, all TV shows, to be honest, have a reputation for like a really exciting, high stakes first part, second part. Okay, I guess that made sense. That was fine. But this really paid off. Like it continued to escalate. It didn't just kind of wind down and come to just a nice, easy conclusion. I mean, what we have now, we have Cardassia join the Dominion. That is a game changer for the rest of the series of the show. Dukat has been orchestrating all this. And we look back on, he was telling Ziyal it's not safe here, you got to go, because he knows that he's going to go join the Dominion fleet and be on his way. And he wanted to bring his daughter with him. So it's just Dukat, right? Just he's been scheming this entire time. And that's who he is, and he just goes where is the best interest for himself, and by extension Cardassia. But he was never even though that he had kind of become grudging respect for Sisko and Kira and all them, he had never really turned around to be a good guy, and this just confirms that, right?
Yeah, it's like that brilliant line, like, me and you never seemed like it belonged together, being on the same side. I think this episode, as a kid, it frustrated me slightly. Like, we had this amazing cliffhanger. I thought, oh my god, here we go, we're going to get war, we're going to get battles, this is going to be unbelievable. But we get, like, that classic Deep Space Nine subversion that we kind of think that they're going to go to war, but then they, by the end of the teaser, that's them off to Cardassia. It's really cool, and I think that's a really nice moment. I think it blew my mind, like, oh my god. But it makes perfect sense that we've seen it all along, that the Dominion have been playing this game, like playing the Klingons, playing the Federation, that they've been getting them to batter each other for like 18 months. So they really have destroyed the Cardassians in a way. They've really put them in a position where the parallels between Germany after the war are just clear, that Cardassia is on its knees and it's perfect time for a coup, a takeover, a solid base that the Dominion can build from. It's perfectly logical. Like, it was always, when you look back on it, it was always going to lead to this from the moment we saw the end of Improbable Cause, the die is cast, that the Cardassians have been taken care of for now. All that matters next is the Federations and the Klingons. And, it's led us to this moment so perfectly well. I think even the moment at the end, like, is a more subversion, that we see it, they're going to bring the Dominion fleet here, we're going to go to war. But really, it's something small going on along, that they were just going to blow up the sun. That's a really cool idea, that wipe out this entire Federation, Klingon, Romulan fleet all in one go. What an easy way to do it instead of bloodshed. It shows that Deep Space Nine is not going to make this a traditional war. It's going to be smart, and everyone knows what they're doing.
Yeah, well said, Lee. I mean, this shows the Dominion are great tacticians, right? Because they're like, why even waste any manpower? We just make the sun supernova and wipe out the fleets of everybody. It's a genius plan. You can see how they took over the Gamma Quadrant and why they're so feared this way. You look at other species, like the Borg, right? The Borg, very intimidating villain, but every time Starfleet comes against them, they easily defeat them. They just get so easily defeated time and time again. And it's a different kind of enemy, don't get me wrong. But this kind of enemy allows for more kinds of stories to be told, right? Because we do get the subversion here and there, but we do ultimately get the all-out war later on in the show too, which really pays off. Now, I do feel like if we had never gotten the war, like, you know, the talk about a Cold War, or the hot war later on in Deep Space Nine, this might have felt more disappointing in retrospect. We're like, oh man, but it was right there, we never got it. But since we did, we got all sides of this kind of conflict between this very complicated villain, because the Dominion is like, it's the anti-Federation. It's a coalition of species, and it's the perfect foil for Starfleet and the Federation.
Yeah, like there's so many little wonderful moments in this episode that we get to see Garak, who's one of my favorite Deep Space Nine characters. We get to see him in a more vulnerable place than we've ever seen him before, that he's a man of bravado, of confidence, and to see him, he's got claustrophobia. That Deep Space Nine does those things so well, where we see these characters have human failings and worries and anxieties, and it's not just that we're above all these things, that someone is genuinely terrified of working in a wall. It's a really lovely touch, and the fact that he gets them home in the end, he becomes a hero, that he's often the anti-hero or the player. He's a genuine hero by the end of this episode, and I think that with this, coupled with the Ziyal plot for him, really is quite a big redemptive moment for him in light of some of his behavior in Improbable Cause, The Die Is Cast, Broken Link. We get to start to see the softening almost of Garak, which is great.
Yeah, I mean that's a tricky thing to do, because when you start peeling back the layers of these mysterious characters who are so popular because they're so like charismatic and mysterious, most of the time it can be a disappointing thing. But with Garak, it just makes him even more interesting. So that's a credit to the writers, a credit to Andrew Robinson for pulling it off. You know, to put a character, as you said, he'd been so in control, and to put him in a situation where he's having a mental breakdown because he can't, you know, he's claustrophobic. So it's great that we got to learn more about Garak, and it didn't dilute his character.
Yeah, and we get to see the end of the Klingon War as well.
Yeah, Kidron recorded. Scalvaron comes back and signs them again, and the Federation and Klingons are allies now. I mean, it did take a season and a half for this to happen, so it wasn't a quick fix. I mean, Way of the Warrior kind of blew things away, the status quo of Star Trek, but they had to earn it. They had to earn it back through lots of battles and lots of episodes, and it really feels earned here.
Yeah, look, there was a lot of bloodshed over that 18 months that we saw with some amazing episodes, like how many people lost their lives in this conflict over a lot of nonsense, a lot of being played, and people being too proud to back off, and to see it come to an end after.
That's war, though, right? I mean, that's the very definition of why we go to war and why we're in wars even now, right?
Absolutely.
So,
it's pettiness. It's not just like some master plan, or, you know, that they're pantomime villains. They're just as failing as we are, and people all around the world. It's wonderful, and it's good to see that this peace treaty now brings in Martok into play. Now he's stationed on Deep Space Nine, so we've got another character based on the station that we're going to learn a lot about over the next 2.5 years.
Yeah, Martok is my favorite Klingon. Like, he is like the Klingon's Klingon. Like, he's a practical Klingon too, because, you know, as we talked about as we're going through Star Trek here, we've talked about Worf a lot and how he puts Klingon heritage, Klingon culture, like on a pedestal, and he gets disillusioned with his people. But Martok really he walks the walk, right, and lives the Klingon lifestyle, and he's a great person for Worf to get paired up with, to show him how to truly be a Klingon.
One final moment I love in this episode is when Dukat gets in touch with Sisko at the end of the episode, and Sisko reminds him that Ziyal would have died in this bomb explosion, and he's so nonchalant about it. And I just love that line where it was like he may have escaped defeat today, but tomorrow, and he goes, it's just the way he says it, we'll see about tomorrow. And then Dukat goes, yes, we will. And it's just like, oh, it's just like, you don't need to do like a big dramatic thing to end an episode or cliffhanger and get you back in for further episodes. It's just a wonderful moment of like, oh, we'll see about tomorrow. And he could be speaking to us audiences so well that everything's changed in 45 minutes, and where we go next is going to be a wonderful experience, I think.
Absolutely. And we barely scratched the surface on both these episodes, and from there to here. So if I haven't watched them in a while, like more than any other episode we've talked about in this block, please go watch these two and experience them for yourself.
Absolutely. So we go on to sweep season again on Voyager. So we were teased with the Borg at the end of our previous episode, Blood Fever. So Chakotay is injured and trapped on a world where the inhabitants are embroiled in a conflict, but the people in rescue and care for him harbour a disturbing secret. They're ex-Borg drones. Meanwhile, in orbit, Voyager has its first ever encounter with a severely damaged Borg cube. and thus begins the Borg adventure in the Delta Quadrant. So, Zach, what did you make of Unity?
I guess it was fine for what it was. I mean, it was a different approach of the Borg, at least. It's something we hadn't seen before, and that's the challenging thing, and that's what I was referencing earlier when I was talking about the Borg. As a villain, they're challenging to approach from different angles because they're so one note. They're so, and that's what makes them appealing because they're a hive mind. They have one purpose. They can't be stopped. That's great. But you can only tell, a couple kinds of stories with them, and then it gets old real fast as we go on to see in Voyager. So I give them credit here, or at least it's something different. It's a whole community that has been gathered. Like, what if a Borg cube, got cut off from the collective, and this is them rebuilding their life. And I thought that was interesting. The community they've established on the planet. I mean, was it the follow up to the tease and blood fever we were all looking for? Probably not. Oh, look, a dead Borg cube and some half Borg people that are friendly now down on the surface. But overall, I guess it was okay. I mean, this is before Voyager was like all Borg all the time. So something different, and I appreciated that about it.
Yeah, I think in retrospect, like, I remember seeing this episode at the time and being so disappointed. I was like, oh my god, the Borg are going to be here. And it's like, oh. And I remember like watching the beginning of the episode and you're seeing them like on the planet and with these like people, and you're like, I don't know what's really going on here. We're the Borg. And I felt like Milhouse when he's watching Itchy scratching Poochie, and he's like, when are they going to get to the fireworks factory? And I was like, come on, the Borg got to show up at some point. And I like it more now in retrospect that, as you say, Voyager became the Borg show really from kind of the end of season 3 onwards. So like this episode, which takes the Borg and gives it kind of an interesting slant, is something that is inventive as opposed to the Borg being this easy to beat villain and we learning too much about them. It still keeps the Borg a mystery. We know something has destroyed this Borg cube, so that teases something to come in the future. But the idea of this Borg colony is quite exciting and quite interesting. So yeah, it's not the best, it's not the most memorable Borg entry or Voyager entry, but it's perfectly fine. It's better in retrospect than it is perhaps as an individual piece.
Yeah, I mean, I give it credit for creativity more than anything else. I feel like they approached it this way because at the time they were thinking, okay, well, we got one little Starfleet ship here, Voyager. It's nowhere near as sophisticated as the Enterprise ship, so they clearly can't go up against a Borg cube. So we have to find a different angle to approach the Borg from. But then they throw it out the window down the road, and Voyager's like blowing up Borg cubes, left and right, and it just
I know,
gets
it's
so
like
absurd.
laser tag. It's just so easy. It becomes ridiculous. Like even now, like you see it as soon as you see the Borg cube, it's like a threat. It's a danger. It's like, oh my god,
like red alert ray shields. So you can feel because they were still a threat at this point. They hadn't been watered down as Voyager has done. And I know we're being pretty hard on Voyager this block, and I apologize to all the Voyager fans out there, but these episodes just don't really get it with me. They just don't. So
yeah, it's a bit of a frustrating batch of Voyager episodes. Like there's good things in them, and like this is like it's a fine episode. Like a little touch I do love in this episode is that the first time they see the Borg cube, there's a little callback to Jerry Goldsmith's amazing Borg score from First Contact. You just hear it kind of like that. I mean, I'm not a musician. We need Brandon Shea right here, right now. But yeah, there's a little callback to First Contact, which I think is greatly appreciated. And at the time, it was still an exciting event to know the Borg are here. And I remembered buying the video solely based on the fact that the Borg were going to be in this episode. So it's not the greatest, but it's unique compared to what we're going to get with the Borg episodes, and it teases some pretty exciting stuff to come with the Borg in terms of the Scorpion two-parter. So there's stuff in there that works, but it's not the greatest. It's a bit of a limp follow-up from what we're kind of teased, or what we brought, our own baggage probably that we brought to this episode thinking the Borg were going to be here.
We're a victim of our own expectations in that way, yeah. And,
absolutely.
Voyager loses yet another shuttle. I'm sure there's a tally on the internet somewhere I could go look up, but I'd be curious to take note of that next time I watch the series all the way through. Like, how many shuttlecraft do they lose?
And we lost Ensign Kaplan as well. So yeah.
What a great loss!
I know there'll be a big funeral there attended by 5 people, so that'll be something to look forward to in the next episode.
How many Voyager episodes, I swear, has a shuttle crash and then the red shirt equivalent dies? That happens so many times.
Yeah, I know. They really are going through them. Between the Maquis and the Starfleet officers, it's really not going to be the biggest party when they get back to San Francisco. It's going to be a lot of upset families.
Oh, totally. Yeah, so, I mean, that's that's pretty much all there is to say about this episode. Hey, the main Borg woman is from Texas. I'm from Texas, so yeehaw and howdy from Texas, y'all. And that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, that does remind me, there's one thing that annoys me in this episode is like they reference that some of the people were survivors of Wolf 359. I really hate when they do that. It's just nonsensical. Like, I don't get it. Like, they never reference it. It's a part of Star Trek that actually irritates me. It's like, it makes no sense. Yes, like, I get it that they keep it a kind of mystery, but it's a mystery that just feels like it's not grounded in any logic, and it's just something that's said for the sake of like a link or a reference.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that would obviously that explains why there's humans out here in the first place, but it makes no sense because the Borg cube was destroyed, and okay, the Borg queen, that's just three-dimensional thinking. Lee.
Yeah, I know the shade she throws on us nerds on the internet. Like, that's what I'm going to say to everything in the future. If anyone like criticizes me as like, that's such three-dimensional thinking.
But yeah, I mean, I can buy that she is escaped because she's a consciousness that's an avatar of her greater consciousness. Whatever, I can buy that. Although it's a complete retcon, sure, I'll allow it, right? But yeah, there should be no survivors from Starfleet from Wolf 359. It makes no sense. A huge continuity break. But hey, it's Voyager. We should be used to that by now, right, Lee? Hey-o.
Exactly. Well, I think we better get out of here before any Voyager fans come and get us. So you can find into the journey if you're wanting a more positive about Voyager podcast. We have tried, but yeah, it wasn't to be with this batch of Voyager episodes. But Deep Space Nine, what a show in the past 4 episodes. So if people want to criticize your three-dimensional thinking, Zach, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, yes, if you want to come hate on me about how awesome Voyager is, you can find me every week here on Trek FM on Standard Orbit, our original series podcast. I'm in the Babel Conference, so, bring it on there. You can also find me on Twitter at MoronZach, at MOOREONZACH. That's me personally. And I'm the host of my own podcast, Always Hold On to Smallville, where we talk about each and every episode of that young Superman TV show. You can find us on Twitter at Always Smallville with one S.
And if you want to be impressed by my 4-dimensional thinking, unlike Zach's pretty pitiful 3-dimensional thinking, you can find me at Lee_Nostromo, at Star Trek VHS, and you can find me on the Senate Floor podcast, where I talk about geek culture, and I don't think I've ever talked about the Borg, so, you'll be safe from any of my opinions on Star Trek Voyager there. So let us know what you think. Were we harsh on Voyager? Were we too high praiseworthy for Deep Space Nine? What were your thoughts? Let us know in the Babel Conference, and we look forward to hearing from you. So thanks for listening for this week. Live long and prosper, everyone.
Bye-bye.